summer, as a church, we're featuring different issues. We call it an FYI series on Wednesday nights. Last week, we had a guy share his doctoral dissertation on cannabis and the effect of cannabis on the brain. Excellent presentation. Next week, we have Jason Hiska from Sturgis Bank is going to be talking about digital currency and where we're headed in that department in the future. So just looking at some items and issues that we think are relevant and of interest, not just for a church or for us, but for our community as well. And obviously this is one that I think is of concern and interest to all of us, alternative energy. And thought Jen would be a good person to invite over this week to share some input on a broader scale what's going on in Michigan. I think in her community, over where her farm is, I know there's some land use issues going on there that I'm sure she can speak from experience. So I'd like to just pray for our meeting, and we're going to unleash Jen. She's got the forum here tonight. Thanks for coming over.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You bet. And we don't want to take all that popcorn home, so if you don't eat some now, you're going to have to eat some before you go. So feel free at any point, pick up a bowl of popcorn, waters, or coffee. Let me pray for us. Lord, thanks for this evening. Thanks for a beautiful day. And we thank you for the creation that you've given us. And you've energized the world. It's the first thing you did when you made the world is you created light, photostatic energy. You've energized the world, and we live by and need, all of us, daily, power, energy, strength. So this is really pertinent in every area of our lives. And as we, as a community, and we, as a state and a nation, and this world are generally short on energy. We pray that you would help us to be wise stewards of the creation you give us. Thanks for Jen words. Bless her conversation with us tonight. We pray in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Well, thank you all so much for coming. Thank you to Jim. I just so appreciate that you, as a pastor and as a church, that you have, I didn't know you were doing this every week, so this is really great, and I think it's really great that churches and pastors engage in the conversation of the issues of our time. I actually spent last week at a conference. It happened to be in Washington, D.C., but they rotate around, and it was called the Statesman's Academy. And it was a week where I really got poured into, and it was about 30 other legislators from around the country, and we really just went through why do we believe what we believe from a biblical perspective, and how do we set policy from a biblical worldview. And I can tell you after spending a year and a half in Lansing that I so needed that, because I'm weary. I feel like oftentimes I'm beating my head against a wall, against people that do not care about communities like mine and people like you. And so I'm sorry. I wish it's not really how, and I didn't even think I'd get emotional, but and Nicole, my staffer, is here, and she spends countless hours on phones because we actually answer our phone. And I told her last week for the first time, if you need to shut the phone off for a few hours, it's okay. But in 2020, when I was frustrated and I'm calling my legislators and I find out that a senator shut his phone off for weeks at a time because he didn't want to answer my calls, that enraged me. And it's really part of the reason why I'm here. So I don't want you to ever think that we don't care and that we're not listening. And that's my job. I don't always like it, but my uncle told me a couple weeks ago, he's at the end of his life, and I was grumbling a little bit, and he said, now wait a minute, you signed up for this? You filed the paperwork to run? And I'm like, oh, you're right. So here I am. So if you have not gotten handouts, we did print some handouts. I'm going to break this into two, subjects, because we have kind of the green energy mandate and then the data center issue. So I think if we kind of tackle them in 2 points. It'll be a little better flow and logic tonight. So the handout that we provided is just kind of where we sit currently with the energy situation and the energy law within the state of Michigan. So if you need one of those, I think we still have some. I don't know, Jim, did you have those back there? Yeah, so if anybody wants one, maybe raise your hand and we'll pass that out. But, so the way the current law sits, going back to 2023, during the Democrat trifecta, they passed the renewable energy mandate, essentially. And so this cost our state $350 billion, and it's going to require us to be 100% renewable energy by 2050. And their definition of renewable energy pretty much is summed up in solar, battery, wind, some hydro, although there's a push to even get rid of a lot of the hydro dams throughout the state. And so that's why we're currently where we're at, why there's been such a large-scale expansion of solar in our area combined with our location because of the high power line that is coming through here, the ITC power line that some of you are affected by. But that was a federal mandate that went into effect. I think it was approved 10 years ago, 8 to 10 years ago. And so that's to upgrade the grid. It's called the Helix Hippo line. So it's somewhere in Indiana, and it's going up to, eventually it will go all the way up to the like Port Huron area, and it's to connect and do major upgrades that were required. And so that's a federal requirement that they've passed federally, and so that line's coming through here. And this is all, I've learned a lot this year, but the way power works is the least amount you have to move it, the longer it goes. And my husband's here who has electrical knowledge in some sense. So yeah, if you want more detail, he'll explain it better afterwards. But so that's why you're seeing a lot of where the solar went and then where the ITC line is going through. They're very close, or they're close to a substation. So in Quincy, for example, you mentioned, Jim, our township the proposal is for a battery storage facility because Consumers has a higher power line that runs along 12, also runs through Hillsdale County. Some of you guys have been affected by that up along Jonesville Road and 12 there. So connecting to there and connecting to in Quincy, we've got a fairly large, I don't know how big it is, but I'm blanking on my word right now. Substation, thank you. So those are where you're kind of seeing the projects. And then there was also an incentive given through the state that if you did the projects in economically depressed communities, which Branch County, Hillsdale County qualify for, then the companies got better tax breaks, tax credits, tax incentives to do so. So it's kind of, we were hit by both sides, or depending on how you look at it, that's how I look at it a little bit. It was, I guess, prime ground down here. So we have introduced legislation. We passed it through the House. It would repeal the green energy mandate. We passed that last April, I believe. It sits in the Senate. It was a party line vote, and I don't see it going anywhere in this term because we still have the same governor and the same Senate that signed this into law. And so those bills are drafted, hopefully with different outcomes come this November when we have a different legislature in January of next year. We can reintroduce those bills and we will see the green energy mandate lifted, and we can go back to making energy and looking at logic to this, that energy needs to be reliable and affordable. That's kind of the bill package that we introduced is surrounded around that we need to look first at reliability, affordability, and then also be wise and good stewards, which natural gas we were using before. clean coal. Coal's come a long ways. And then kind of the other up-and-coming thing are these small nuclear reactors. And in fact, I don't know if you followed, but the nuclear power plant, we're the first nuclear power plant in the nation to come back online, Palisades. And that came up, I don't know if it actually finally went live in January or February. It was supposed to happen last year, but it got delayed a little bit. So that's exciting. There's these also small nuclear reactors that are up and coming and could be really beneficial and produce a lot of energy in a very small footprint. So those are I think the things that we can look forward to, but until we repeal the green energy mandate in Michigan, those things aren't going to be advanced in the state. And then the other one is Public Act 233, which if you've attended any of your local township meetings or started to engage in this process and discussion, that's where they passed and took away local zoning and siting, and they sent it to the Michigan Public Service Commission that they can override what you, as a local township, the guidance, the zoning that you want to put in place. If the company coming in with the solar or the battery doesn't like what you're proposing, then they can override you and appeal to the Michigan Public Service Commission. We sent some guidance out in January or February to every township in the district and encourage them to work with their attorney to set up a CREO, which is a compatible renewable energy ordinance. And then that sets the guidance and the framework within your township as best as you can right now. A company could still appeal that to the Michigan Public Service Commission, but it shows at the local level that at least you're being consistent, you're being fair across the board. You've determined an area in which you could have renewable energy in your community. We were also very hopeful. There was a lawsuit that was through the Court of Appeals that was filed by a company called Foster Swift, an attorney company that took on multiple townships, the Michigan Association of Counties, even the Michigan House of Representatives. We signed on to that lawsuit as well. Unfortunately, we lost. There were two things that they kind of sided with locals, but two that we really needed, they didn't side with locals on. And so it still sits as of now that if a company doesn't like what your township sets in the framework of a CREO, they can appeal it to the Michigan Public Service Commission and potentially override your local zoning. The Michigan Public Service Commission is a 3-panel board appointed by the governor. One of them's an engineer. The other 2 on that board currently are one was a former staffer for the governor, has really no background in energy. And the other one also, I think, was a former staffer, maybe has a little bit more of a business mind, but essentially they're it's a deck stacked against us. So, well, and I'll give you an example. How many of you in here, I know some of you from the ITC issue. Anybody have the ITC power line? A couple of you. So we wrote a letter, had a meeting, submitted a request to the MPSC on your guys' behalf. When they had the hearing last summer, MPSC told ITC, you're bad actors in this case. You changed the route. You didn't properly notify everyone, but approved. And so it's just really frustrating because there's no consequences for when these people are doing what they shouldn't be doing and following the process by which they should be following it. So again, we've proposed 2 bills there that would repeal this, allow zoning and siting to go back. Those passed through the House last April. I think I might have misspoke. The other bills passed through, we passed those in May or April of this year. And then the Public Act 233 repeal we passed last April. So we passed that at the beginning of the legislative term. Again, those sit at the Senate. The Senate's Democrat-controlled, and so they have yet to give a hearing on those bills as well. Again, even removing, if we repeal that, hopefully next term, it still doesn't take away solar and wind. It still allows it as an option. It sends it back for locals to decide, though, what's best in your district, in your community, and allow locals to make a decision. So where does that leave you? The best thing I can encourage each one of you is to show up. A lot of these proposals and these things are approved through your local township, through local zoning, there's actually a county master plan as well. And so those are committees that have kind of flown under the radar for a lot of years. I've been to a lot of township meetings in the last 3 or 4 years, and sometimes I was the only person in the audience, 1 or 2 people. And so that's where it becomes critical. That is where you learn what's going on in your community. You have an ear to what is happening locally. And then there's several townships. I don't know how many of you, do you know if you live in a township with no zoning at all? Okay, yeah, so there's still some of those. There's a mixed feeling about zoning. I grew up in a township, also they still have no zoning. I mean, zoning can be viewed by some as burdensome and another overreach of government. On the flip side, though, in some of these cases that we're dealing with, zoning is the opportunity that you have as local members of the community to decide what you want in the framework in which you want your community to look like. So I'll give you an example of a zoning issue that it's in Kent County. It's a township that they had zoned an area industrial about 15 years ago, and Steelcase owned it. And Steelcase held that ground until 2020 or 2021, when they're losing money because no one's sitting in an office anymore, right? Nobody's buying office equipment. So they sold that land to Microsoft. Microsoft bought it and has sat on it, and now that's where they want to put a data center. And the people in that community are super mad. They want to recall the township board, but unfortunately, the township board made that decision to zone that industrial years ago. And so you already made that decision. So there's a lot of limited control that they have at that point in time. But you can make those decisions now if you set up zoning in your local township. Do you want an industrial facility somewhere in your township? Do you want to have an area that is, well, I don't want to say do you want, because the reality is for the green energy right now, you have to choose an area where you are agreeable to have renewable energy. So where is that going to be in your township until we repeal this? So that's kind of where we sit right now on the energy and the green energy mandate. So where am I at on time, Nicole? Oh, okay. So I was thinking of pausing here and seeing if anybody wants to ask questions right now on that, and then I'll kind of shift to the data center issue about 7:30, or depending on how many questions we have, and then we'll open it up at the end again for questions.
I have a question.
Yes.
So the Michigan Public Service Commission, as I I went to the hearings and testified because of the ITC line,
Yeah.
et cetera. And is there any way to increase representation on that board so it's not 3 people who are, in my book, when I look at the resumes of them, they're all energy alumni. But how do we get more representation on that board of business, industry, what have you?
Yeah, so it would have to be changed legislatively. There's been some proposals put forward, ideas on that. But again, that's probably not going to happen between now and the end of the year. Some of the governor candidates has proposed some different ideas. I think the one I like, one of the best, is that when the governor picks those, so a lot of those people are kind of like the governor's cabinet. When the governor picks those people, then it has to be legislatively approved, just like at the federal level. The Senate has to confirm the appointments of the president. So at least then it would be the legislative body having an opinion, because right now we don't have any say.
No,
Yeah.
that's bad.
Yeah,
I mean, it really was like a waste of time to go there even to speak. They did absolutely nothing and they just sat there and the response was like, thank you for coming, but really just, what a waste.
yeah, kind of procedural.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we checked our box.
Yeah,
We let you folks speak. That's it.
Would you explain a Creo and how a township develops Creo?
yeah, so it's CREO stands for Certified Renewable Energy Ordinance, and you need an attorney. I mean, that would be my first advice, and I'm not an attorney, so I don't want to give legal advice, but an attorney can help you walk through that. I will say, with the way the ruling went, it was more promising when we thought maybe we had a chance in the Court of Claims on that case. When the ruling was made, a CREO is a little, I guess it's just not, it doesn't have as much teeth as we had hoped it could have had the ruling gone our way entirely. But essentially, it allows the township to say, okay, we're gonna allow so many acres or a percentage of the ground in our township to be renewable energy. And then we want the setbacks to be this amount. We want the portfolio to look, so much you could do, I think, so much wind, so much solar. And there's a whole website that kind of details it, but my advice to townships is actually to reach out to Foster Swift. They're probably the attorney in the state that has best represented townships on this and won some cases where townships didn't follow the process and didn't have a CREO set up and kind of did some agreements before they should have. And so there have been some small wins in some situations. So, but essentially that's the one option a township has as a CREO and setting guidance around renewable energy.
And Jen, I could send that out to anyone who signs up on the
Oh, yeah.
sheet that we have typed up on that.
Okay, yeah, so I don't know if you heard Nicole, but we can, if you want to leave us your email, we can send you a more detailed explanation of that and how a township can go about creating a CREO. Do you have a CREO? Yeah,
No, not yet.
no, not yet, okay, okay.
We were told by Foster Swift, because we're not zoned, they weren't sure how well it would hold up,
Okay,
so, don't know.
this is the Allen Township Supervisor, and you have another solar project coming?
Parkwood 3, yeah,
Yeah,
and it's gonna be probably over 1,000 acres in Allen Township.
the one thing I'll add real quick on that, and I'll take your question, is the other, I guess, positive point is that the federal tax credits end at the end of this year, and actually, the project has to be, I think, completed by December to even get those tax credits. So there is some promise there that will maybe slow down these projects coming, that there's a big push right now because they're trying to get that federal tax credit. And we did end the credits at the state level in last year's state budget, and there's no credits that are in this year's budget that we just passed.
Who gets that credit?
I think the company does. The company that's, the company putting in the solar array. Yeah. Yes, sir.
Well, I've actually worked on some power plants. And as far as I know, we have no ability whatsoever to store energy. It has to be produced. And I'm not against renewable energy or clean energy. But if the wind is blowing too hard, or it's not blowing, or the sun has set, solar panels don't store any energy unless you get a battery pack. We don't have that technology that we can all turn on our lights because of a battery. We need more power, and the man here is an electrician. We have to instantly produce it and ramp up the production if we need more power. Am I correct with that statement?
No, there are technologies for battery backup.
There are, but for all of us?
Yeah, if they'll
I
produce them and they
disagree.
can go. That's the biggest manufacturer of battery packs right now.
Well, actually, I would say
Then
two.
we all have to have them in our house.
I would say two things there. One is, that's why you're seeing more battery storage facilities popping up, like in Quincy Township, there's a proposal for, it's 10 acres, battery storage facility. There's the one just north of Coldwater, that's a battery storage facility. There is, I think, another proposal on the south side of Coldwater that's being proposed right now. So they are putting battery storage facilities in to store the power off the solar. And then the second thing is that I just spoke with someone whose solar panels were destroyed actually this spring on their own property. They have geothermal heat, and so they put solar panels in several years ago. The tornado that went through in April took them out. They're replacing them, and they're actually going to install battery backup for their home because the price has gone down significantly. So I think they're down to, they said, like 10 grand now, where when they first looked at doing that, it was 20 or 30 grand. And so the return on investment wasn't there, but it is now. And the technology of the panels has improved enough that they said we honestly could probably go off the grid between the panels. They have 2 panels and then this battery backup. So it is continually advancing. I don't know who is next. Can I go with you?
So, utilities make it very hard for consumers with solar panels to generate credit and excess energy buyback. Is there any legislation to bring fair prices of supplying excess energy to the grid? And then why not implement a program for residents with solar and battery backup to supply energy during peak demand? Because Massachusetts does this.
Yes.
And so does Texas and California. I don't know, why don't we do that?
That is a great question, and I think the answer is that when this deal was made in 2023, it was written in such a way that it benefits pretty much the large-scale utility companies in Michigan and not individual landowners. So in Massachusetts and some of those you're referencing, they have a larger percentage of their energy that can come from private entities or individuals. In Michigan, that's capped at 10%. You cannot produce more than 110% of your energy. So if you bought solar panels for yourself or battery backup, you can only sell 10% back onto the grid. And so that's what's limiting and making it affordable. Ann Arbor, the city of Ann Arbor, they're considering going completely renewable energy, and they would actually bypass and do it themselves. But the problem is the infrastructure, or you either have to create all that infrastructure yourself to transport the energy, or you're gonna have to lease all of consumers or DTE's poles and lines, and then at that point, you're back at, is it affordable or not? And so that's where that cap needs lifted, and I've worked on some legislation actually with some people across the aisle that are in favor of that on the Democrat side, and so I think there could be some movement there. You know, some people would like to see the cap lifted altogether. I guess that happened, I don't remember this, but in 2010 in Michigan, they deregulated, and then the utilities came in there. I guess there was a lot of instability in the grid at that point in time, so utilities came back in, and then they went from back to regulatory, and then with the 10% cap. And so that's why we can't just, I mean, you could, if you can individually afford to do that, to buy your own solar panels and battery backup. If you can make those numbers work, you can do that, but you can't produce more than 110%.
Well, I mean, can you get rid of that?
That's where I'm saying not, and it will not pass right now, but there's legislation that we're working on and have been in works with, and then it's bipartisan to go to at least 130% is kind of where we're proposing right now.
As somebody with residential solar, you talk about repealing the mandates for green energy, and for that, what are you changing as far as somebody who currently has residential solar? What are you looking at changing? We're on distributed generation. Some people say net metering was better. The cap as to how much you can make. Personally, we're limited. our transformer, they limited us to no more than 22,500 watts because our transformer is 25,000 watts. Selling
Okay.
back. If we wanted to change that, we had to pay for a new transformer and we had to redo the entire interconnection agreement, which took a ridiculous amount of time to begin with. So what are you looking at changing as far as the guidelines for residential? Are you just repealing the mandates?
Well, as I said, lifting the cap, I think if we could get it to 30, even 25%, that would be huge. That would help tremendously. It would allow people to, like, for example, we put solar in front of our barns, okay? But we were told we had to remove one panel because we exceeded the 110% capacity. And so I was so mad at the time because I'm like, wait a minute, we want green energy, but we're one panel over, so we have to take, yeah. And so, going to 130, we've looked at, some other ideas. If we have to keep the green energy mandate, some of the things that other countries are doing, and even some other states, is saying when you're building a house, you've got to build it with solar panels. I don't really like that legislatively. I think it's nice to encourage people to do, but it is expensive. So I'm interested to know what you just shared about the cost, because I had not heard that about the upgrade of the,
If we wanted to send back more, they limited us. We have a 32,000 kilowatt
Yeah.
system. We're only allowed to send back 22,500 at a time.
okay.
At any
Some
point in
points
time.
in time, we might be sending 8,000 watts to the ground.
Yeah, we're wasting,
So when I
Because-
call consumers,
because our batteries
I
are
say,
full. We have batteries. They're
Okay.
full, and they won't allow us to send any more back than that.
They won't buy the extra.
Right,
Yeah.
because of the transformer, they say.
So I call consumers and ask them, do you want my
Mm-hmm.
extra? Oh, absolutely. So, okay, well, then we have to go from a 25K transformer to a 50.
And we have to
We
pay
can
for
do
it
that. It'll be about $13,000.
for us.
Well, you can't math
Mm-hmm.
the extra 8,000 watt
We've already
sell
spent
back to
enough.
13 grand,
Yeah,
so
the solar was already
you just waste
expensive
it.
enough.
So, but my point is that they don't really wanna buy your power back.
Well, the biggie was interconnection agreement to force you to review it, and they were so pickety that it took like 6 months to get through it because they nitpicked every single thing, and every single step had a 10-day reply, and they took every 10-day reply. And then when it was finally up and running and they were supposed to test it, they went through 2 10-day periods where they didn't come out and test it.
We had a similar experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it's intentional.
We were, yeah.
But it's not intentional.
Yeah, no, I think that would be great I would love, maybe we work on some things to, ultimately, initially, if we could just increase the cap, and allow for more production.
Right, so
but that's
if you
for
increase the
No.
cap, if you get into our situation, you're still down to where you're gonna have to pay to change that transformer.
Right,
Or, that's how
Yeah.
I'm gonna limit you.
yeah,
Because you can't tell consumers that I can send 30,000 watts back to a transformer that's only rated at 25,000.
yeah,
Protect their equipment.
right.
So,
And that's the other, there is that argument of, that's what they'll tell you, the utility companies will tell you, well, it's all of our lines, it's all of our infrastructure. And so, and I don't know if you guys have looked at your breakdown of your energy bills, and it's not so much your usage that's so bad, if we just had to pay the usage fee, but then there's that little line called distribution charges, that's where, and there was some other legislation in the bill package about repealing, and I've got some more information up here on that if you want to really kind of get into some of the other weeds of that, but, that they're spending, essentially those distribution fees can go to do a whole lot of other expenses that they just tack on to our bills under distribution fees, and so there is also legislation on repealing that. Sorry, I forgot your question.
You're right. So kind of touching off of what you just said, part of the wholesale for renewable energy is that it was going to bring our cost down eventually, right? And yet, this past year, there's been at least 2 instances where the electric companies have requested to increase our cost. What is the government doing to try to maintain what we were paying, and maybe get some of the relief that we've been told that we were going to get from the renewable energies?
Yeah, so that was in the bill package here that I mentioned. That was, one of them was affordability and reliability first. Nope. Stopping the rate skim that funds political activity. So the money would stay, and this is kind of a comparison, a grid that shows how much money is skimmed off to go towards their political, energy democracy, environmental implications type studies, and they can take all of that and use it, and then it gets billed back to us as distribution charges, and then,
So are we doing anything to be able to control some of that? Be able to put some kind of cap, or be able to, in one way or another, limit what they're able to do or charge us for that?
that's the bill package we introduced in the House. It fixes all of these issues, but it's sitting in the Senate. And the Senate, it's a 2018, the Democrats have 2 extra seats. So they will not take up the bill package unless something majorly changes between now and the end of the year. So that's where we're kind of stuck on that.
Do you know if the Michigan Townships Association has showed any opposition to this renewable energy concept?
Oh, yeah.
Especially how it's affecting the town.
They were in the lawsuit that was heard, the one I'd mentioned earlier, that went through the Court of Appeals. They helped file that. So they're opposed to the Michigan Public Service Commission overtaking local control. So yeah, they've been actively involved from the beginning. One other thing I was just gonna tell you, that one of the energy bills was that it would lower property taxes and utility payments. And then if we pass that legislation, the utilities would have had to lower rates because of the cost savings on their personal property taxes. That, however, ended up not going through. It was something they were trying to get through in reducing income taxes, or sorry, not property taxes, state property taxes, but that did not end up going through, and I doubt it's gonna make it through.
Yeah, because the way that it is right now, not only are they getting the increase that they're requesting, but then they're getting the benefit of the tax breaks that they're getting on top of that. So basically, they're double dipping us.
Correct. You are correct.
Yeah, I guess it's concerning, because I mean, I think they took in, what, 1.2 billion in profit last year, and they asked for a $560 million price increase, which then they, I guess, capped it and allowed them like, what, 300 million? So I guess $1.5 billion isn't enough profit for them to make.
Right.
I mean, we're paying for that, so people can do whatever.
To answer your question, they asked for an 8% increase. That's 4% passes it every year. So you're gonna get 4%.
It's been twice this year that they've done that.
Well, they increased it once and they asked once, but they're just gonna increase your rate 4% a year.
Just curious, like, what's the delta between what they pay you folks for electricity and what we pay
Means
for?
strike.
So how much do
Sorry.
they pay people for their electricity? I guess what's the delta between what you get paid for the electricity you put back on the line versus what we all pay?
We just kind of round some numbers, but roughly, they charge us 17 cents and they pay us 10.
Winter rate, and then summer I have
Just
completely got a
rough,
handle on.
like I said, you can narrow it down to decimals and whatever, but
16.6 is the winter rate, and they pay us just around 10 cents for that winter rate. It's a little bit more complicated with time of use in the summer. We do get a higher rate from 2 to 7, the peak, but it doesn't come anywhere close to, I think, 19 or so, but it's 27 or so is what you're paying during that time, so.
yeah.
Yeah, that would be nice if it was equal. That could be another
Where
thing.
does the state sit right now as far as
The percentage?
Yeah.
Oh, that's a good question. I do,
Or how many more fields are
mm-hmm. Can, you wanna look? Yeah, we might have to get back to you on that. I know, so the requirement under the law is that by 2030, we're supposed to be at 50%, and then by 2040, it's 100%. 2050, it's 100%. So I think 2030, it's supposed to be at 50%. I thought at one point I heard we were like at 15%, but,
How much of the energy that's being produced with solar and stuff stays in Michigan? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
All this stuff out here on Lockwood Road and stuff, all that stuff's going to Indiana.
so, I don't know that that's, I've heard that when we've pushed back and asked, and we heard that,
You guys go ahead,
Are you-
we've got a low pressure
Okay.
scenario here, we're just gonna see if we can help them out.
okay. I think what I've heard, when we asked ITC that question, because we heard that it was gonna go to Canada, that's not true. It's staying in the United States, that they're not transmitting that. And, I think didn't we confirm that the solar is staying in Michigan? We can ask that.
Those power lines that are put in, we send it to Indiana.
No, I think the Helix HIPAA line is to connect the transmission, but all that energy is still staying in the state, yeah.
Isn't Michigan a net importer of energy, so like they're actually looking at shipping power out of Indiana up into Michigan to help us with our needs? That's what I understand.
Well, we're short, in particular in the winter, especially in northern Michigan, especially this year where it was really cold. And that was why, thankfully, we did get the extension to keep the Rice power plant up and operational, because that would have been detrimental to northern Michigan. And so that was supposed to be on the shutdown mode, so, we're thankful for that.
There's gonna be shortages, period, when you look at B7, PJM, that because they're taking all of the traditional methods offline, and they haven't filled in, and what they are filling in with isn't stable, that we're looking at shortages.
Well, and I think that is a good segue into the data center discussion, because
Which will make it worse.
yeah, so, I don't know if any of you follow Mike Rowe. He's the guy that used to host Dirty Jobs. So he has a podcast, and I really enjoy listening to that podcast. And he had, the vice president on, was one of the most recent podcasts he did, and he was interviewing him mostly about his book. But towards the end of the conversation, he said, okay, data centers. What's the opinion, good, bad? Why are people so mad about data centers? And he said, I think fundamentally the issue is energy, and that our energy costs in the US are so high because we've not allowed for expansion. And so he had a graph, and I wish I should have printed it, I guess, but like if this is my hand, here's about the expansion of energy that's occurred in the United States in the last 20 years. Here's the expansion of energy that China has done in the last 20 years. So while we've barely kept pace with our energy usage, China's exploded. And so that's why they're able to expand in data centers, expand in AI. And so the problem is that now we want to bring data centers into the United States. We want to onshore our data. I think this administration is, they've been very vocal about that, even in the campaign, and onshoring and actually growing the United States economy, and that to have the opportunities and the accessibility and technology to do that, you have to have data centers in the United States. To have good data centers, you have to have energy. And that's where we're in this catch-22, especially in Michigan, because of our green energy, renewable energy requirement. And so his perspective is that if we can get this figured out, and we can get you know, back to using natural gas, back to using coal, that's clean, back to nuclear, then this will balance out. And now this is where, and we can have a discussion on this. The question then comes though is, will everybody be okay with data centers if energy is affordable? And I have a short video, do you think that's gonna work? That, I found this today because I just feel like it does a really good job of kind of explaining where we're at in this debate, and then I'll share a little bit more and we'll open up for that. Maybe? Good technology.
Okay,
Can you put the caption?
I finally found something Republicans and Democrats agree on.
I don't
They
know
all
if we
hate
can.
data centers. An issue almost nobody had heard of a year or two ago is now blowing up in small towns across the country, and the opposition is winning. Billions of dollars in projects have been blocked. Local leaders have been ejected from office. Heck, people's houses are getting shot up over these things, and a recent Gallup poll shows that more people are opposed to having a data center in their own town than a nuclear power plant. This one didn't start with an elephant in a room. It started with a question mark. What's going on? Because going in, I just didn't understand why these things were so controversial. I mean, we're not talking about an oil refinery or a pig farm. We're talking about warehouses full of computers. I'm Ken LaCourte, and here's what I learned. We'll first start with data center basics, what these buildings actually do and why we actually need so many of them. Then we'll take a look at the trade-offs, the pros and cons. After that, we'll ask whether the opposition is grassroots or astroturfed. And finally, we'll dig into what I believe is underlying it all, the deeper reasons this fight has gotten so personal so fast. Okay, so before we get to the pitchforks, let's cover the data center basics. These are just buildings full of computers, rows of servers and processors stacked in racks, humming in a climate-controlled warehouse, wired to the internet, and kept alive by a lot of electricity. When you stream a movie, back up your photos, send an email, or ask a chatbot a dumb question at 2 a.m., that request goes to one of these buildings. It gets handled by a machine on a rack, and it comes back to you in a few milliseconds. The cloud everyone talked about a few years ago, it's probably a warehouse in Virginia, or Texas, or 40 minutes outside of some town you've never heard of. These aren't specifically AI buildings. We've all relied on data centers for years. It's just that their spread went largely unnoticed. And then AI came along, and it's very hungry. Training and running these models requires a massive amount of computing power, and computing power means electricity and more servers. Here's an important number that matters in this debate. A typical AI-focused data center can use as much power as 100,000 homes. And the biggest one's going up right now, about 20 times that, for just one building. The International Energy Agency says the electricity these things burn worldwide is on track to roughly double by 2030. And the AI-focused slice set to...
We can pause it there.
You don't want the commercial?
No, I don't want the commercial. So I'm glad to share that. It's about a 20-minute video, and he kind of breaks it down from there and goes through all of the kind of hot topic items, and I'm going to just share those. But I thought it just was very informative, gave the kind of the basic facts. This is what a data center is. This is why our energy costs continue to go up and will probably continue to go up unless we address that when a data center comes in, they have to supply their power. They've got to cover the cost of that, and it can't be added back to us as ratepayers. So one other thing I forgot to mention just before I forget, I do have some information up here. One thing you can do if you're a landowner and you're looking at a way of helping to offset some of your costs and taxes, there's a program called PA 116. It's a highly underutilized program in the state, but this information is up here. It's through MDARD. You can also, you have to apply through your township, but I brought that just so, if you want to know any more about that later. So, okay. Data centers. So back in February, I introduced a bill to actually do a 1-year moratorium on data centers. I'll be honest, I'm not opposed to data centers. I understand that, like this video just explained, do we all have these, right? We all have technology, and so we have to have a place to store the data. My concern is that when I started digging into this issue, and in the lame duck of 2024, so this would have been right before I came in, they passed a bill package that allows data centers to be given tax breaks to come into the state of Michigan. To qualify for those tax breaks, though, they have to do several things. And Michigan State University did a really good report summary on what those items are. But essentially, the one that I have real concerns about is that 90% of their energy has to be from renewable energy. And so you're only going to continue then to see this increase in solar panels and wind turbines, battery storage facility, because if the data center wants to get the tax breaks, then you have to have more renewable energy offered to them. And so we are in this area down here again, going back to our land is affordable. It would be nice if we would offer more money and incentives to brownfield development, but as one of the articles explains, part of the issue is to develop a brownfield. If there's already an existing structure, you've got to remove that structure. The state, the bureaucracy, and EGLE, which is the Environmental, Great Lakes, and Energy, it's a whole process. I met with a guy who's trying to redevelop the Klein Tool manufacturing old building in Jonesville. What he thought would be a 2-year process is 5 years, and he's still waiting on getting all the approval. That's a brownfield site, okay? So it's very regulatory, burdensome, and they don't want to mess around with the time and the money. And so land in rural communities like ours tends to be cheaper. And so, again, that's why they're looking at locations where they can buy, like in Saline Township, where they bought 250 acres, and you have accessibility to water and the energy, and that's why it's being developed there. And so land affordability, unfortunately, that makes us a prime location. Next is energy. Again, I already explained kind of the renewable energy to get the tax break, and then the 2050 mandate. So I think we're only going to continue to see more solar come in unless we can get this repealed. And I'm hopeful that next year, with a new governor, new legislature, that we can have a logical conversation and look at both sides of this point. And how do we move forward with technology, but also be realistic in where our energy has to come from and how do we source it. The third issue with data centers is water. And you can hear both sides of the aisle on this, viewpoints out there. I think in our area, in Michigan in general, because we have so much water, again, that makes us a prime location. I've said if you take the brownfields in places like Saginaw, Flint, Port Huron, Detroit, Battle Creek, where you've got a good water source, you've got a lot of brownfields, and places that could be really re-energized with some economic development, those wouldn't be bad locations for data centers. But again, it's until we address some of these brownfield restrictions, they're probably gonna keep looking at locations in rural communities. There is one, I don't know if you've followed this, but there's one being proposed that I know of in Branch County, and that's in Girard Township. It's land out by Walmart Distribution Center. You know, if we have to have one here, I think that's not the worst location. That's already zoned industrial. We have Walmart DC. Clemens is out there. If you look at some of other states, if I've driven across the country, and a lot of the corridors along highways are being developed. And I guess if we're gonna have development, I would rather it be along highways than being all across our rural countryside. Let's keep it along the major interstates. And you've got your major, let's make our major trunk lines of energy flow through there, and almost like these major veins, if you will. And that's where your energy and that's where your development occurs. And we actually did pass a bill through the House that actually would give right-of-way where all your ITC lines, all your gas infrastructure, large infrastructure, that would have to be first right-of-way instead of just going through someone's personal property. And that passed through the House, I think, the end of June. On the water issue, he does a good job of explaining in that movie. Most of these are now closed-loop systems, and so they don't use as much water as what they first would have used for cooling. A lot of them, they say it's the equivalency of like watering a golf course. Erin Brockovich has taken a stand on this issue. I watched her video too, because I try to hear both sides of the argument. She would say it's more than that. And it also, if you're putting a data center in a location like Arizona, where the water supply is low, or parts of California, and they're doing a well to do it, that's where people are having their water bottom out, or you're getting brown water because there's not enough water left in the aquifer. So that's just another major, I think, issue to be, if one's going to go here, how is the water gonna be sourced? Is it gonna be through the city of Coldwater? Are they gonna annex that like they did with Clemens to supply the water? Or is it gonna be a high capacity well? And just ensuring that the aquifer can handle that. And then the last issue is noise. And I don't know where my phone went, but there's a clip out there of, it's Dowagiac, the data center in Dowagiac, and the noise. And we just listened to it today. I mean, it's like a screeching, oh, here's my phone. But you can go on YouTube and look, or Facebook, and you'll hear it. It's just a very high-pitched, actually, I just found my phone. Did I send that to you, Nicole?
No, we just pulled it up on yours. And you are at 8 o'clock.
Oh, I'm at 8, okay. So I think that's the other major concern, and, yeah, I don't know what I did with that. Yeah, see if you can find that. But, the situation Dowagiac, oh, I know, I got it here. I'll play you this one. That's one, and then, this is the other one.
This is the Dowagiac Data Center. It's very small, but here's the noise.
So it's kind of like just this. Yeah, it's the cooling system of some sort is what they say the noise comes from. Now, there's new technology out there that they say there's things they can do. There's some some of these facilities are being sued for the noise. Again, going back to Erin Brockovich, the interview I watched with her, she's saying in some places even the animals, the wildlife are being affected by the noise. It's just kind of this constant, and that they're not, like cattle aren't even, the cows aren't having calves, they won't go into heat because of whether it's the stress.
There's a story out, TVA put it out, Texas Department of Ag, but a guy had his whole group of bred cows, he had, I don't know, it was like 50 to 75 head of cows. The calves, they either aborted them or they were born stillborn. And he said, like, there's no reason for it, you know, they have no disease or, they're not old stock, they're young stock, but that should never have happened. He said the only thing they contribute to is the change that a data center was put in and the cattle were pastured beside it, and that vibration maybe caused them to lose their calves.
Yeah. So again, going back to what can you do, okay? So data centers are the one thing that's a bit different than the power and the renewables because there is no state law requiring them. And so a township can put a moratorium. Several municipalities around the state have done that. You can do a moratorium, you can do a pause. The bill I proposed was a 1-year moratorium so that we could set better guardrails and look at what we had proposed. I personally don't think that billion-dollar corporations should get tax breaks for coming to build in our state. I have a problem with that. And so if you want to come here, then you pay your fair share in taxes like all the rest of us. So that's problem one. And then I just think the guardrails around, if they're gonna go somewhere, let's make sure they're in a place. So when we've expanded our farm, we have to go through right to farm siting. Right to farm siting says, okay, you can't have 13 other residences within, how many half a mile radius of where your farm is. So why don't we do the same thing for data centers? Why aren't they under the same scrutiny? Maybe it should even be less than that if the noise is like that. Or what are you gonna do for the noise to control that? And so I just think, I think as I look back on our country and I look back at, we can all drive by things. Oh, a perfect example in agriculture is harvester silos, those blue harvester silos. The joke in ag is that everybody that put a harvester silo in is no longer a dairy farmer because they were this great idea. Oh, this is gonna make your life so much easier. You'll be able to go to your kids' basketball games and, farming will be fun again. And they cost so much money. They had constant breakdowns. Maintenance was expensive. And it just never really produced the outcomes that they promised. And so I don't want us to be having knee-jerk reactions to something, while at the same time, again, I recognize that technology is probably not going away. And so how do we balance that and how do we make sure we're making good choices? So.
Is there bipartisan appetite to address the cost, where they're located, the water? Because that's the only way you're gonna make any progress. Is there an opportunity for both sides to work on that?
There is, except I would say it's an election year. And so the amount of time that's gonna be in Lansing is limited. And so, but yes, we had a data center rally just to bring awareness. We had members of both sides of the aisle out there.
They're not gonna go away, they're gonna come.
It is the one point I think we agree across the aisle on, a lot of us. I will say, there's probably more on the other side of the aisle that I agree with probably on the data center than some in my own party because
they're anti?
Well, it's not that they're anti, but the theory is on some of our caucus members is that bringing data centers in will force a change in the green energy mandate because it's not sustainable. You can't sustain green energy and have data centers. And so they're like, bring the data centers in. It's the fastest way to repeal the green energy mandate.
But the biggest thing is that the people don't bear the cost.
Yeah.
And that the water isn't affected and that they don't plop them down in the middle of
Right.
farmland and residential.
Right.
It's silliness to not put them in industrial zones already.
Right.
That solves the noise problem, there's already noise there.
Don't we already have enough
But
legislation to make sure
no,
that they do that?
no, because if your township is not zoned, they can put it wherever they want. And that goes back to
Pull it from
the
NDSC.
importance of you as members of townships to show up at your township meetings and get involved, join the zoning, board, get involved. That's what you can do. And you can have a say at this point on this issue.
So using the green energy requirement, can you require the data centers to produce so much of their own energy?
We could, but we won't this term. The rest of this year, I don't think that will move.
Is
But
there bipartisan appetite for that?
yes, and I will say federally, there has been executive order issued on that they have to cover the cost of their own. So, and DTE did come out with the issue in Saline Township, and they said they are covering the cost. The part where I think it's questionable is, okay, they're covering the cost to produce the energy for the data center, but then again, what about all the upgrades on the line and the infrastructure? And again, that goes back to distribution fees that gets distributed to all of ratepayers. So how do we ensure that
Well, if they're going to have to get that much energy, then they should be put in the bill, not everybody else.
well, and some other states have required, what you're saying is that, I think it was Louisiana, if you're building the data center, then you've got to build and provide either natural gas or a nuclear reactor at the facility to supply your own energy.
I would just tell you guys, I worked directly with the data center industry for 4 years in Northern Virginia. Michigan's about 10 years behind where we were in Northern Virginia with a lot of this stuff. If you guys want to see how to limit and restrict data centers while still making them profitable and keeping them out of the public eye, you should look at Loudoun County, Virginia's zoning ordinance. When I was there, we actually passed an ordinance requiring them, because they do have the technology to limit sound. It's just expensive, so they don't want to put it on. So we required it at the local level. We required them to have their own substations that were fully powered and paid for by them. We required them to create natural buffers so that there were trees and other things in between sight lines from residences. We required them to pay back. We actually required them to pay more in taxes. It wasn't even a tax credit, it was like an anti-tax credit. They had to pay 4 times as much as regular people did in the technology tax. That tax alone completely funds 96 public school locations in Loudoun County, Virginia. So if data centers have the ability to be good community partners, it's just expensive for them, so they don't want to. So you have to step in and force them to if there's something that's going to be here. So I would just encourage folks who want to see a community that's kind of dealt with data centers, because up until 5 years ago, 75% of all data ran through Loudoun and Fairfax County, Virginia. It's
Yeah.
spreading now because of AI. But go look at the zoning ordinance days. I was there for several of the ordinances that were passed. I helped author a couple of them. And it works if you force them to be good community partners.
Thank you, Andrew. I appreciate that, because one of I think it was the Erin Brockovich interview I listened to, that was the point that the person interviewing her said, is that in that county, also the other thing was that people's property taxes decreased. They required,
Taxes by almost
yeah.
6% every year.
Yeah.
It was equal. We were going below the equalized rate every year. It was huge property tax savings.
which there again then, right? Would you be okay with having a facility like that if at least it's going to save you money and they're contributing to the tax base? Those are things that we should be considering instead of giving them 20 years of no need to pay personal property taxes. Yes.
Well, that's an interesting point, because they still did it for a profit, or they wouldn't have done it.
Oh, sure. Yeah, they're still making money.
So,
They're still making money.
it's a matter of us getting ahead of them. But I want to back up just for a moment, and I'm going to ask a question in this room, because we're saying that we'll be able to store batteries. Michigan has given Ford a grant, federal money to build batteries for their automobiles. How many people in this room drive a hybrid car?
I drive a pure electric.
Or plug-in? Oh, Geo?
Pure, it's all bad.
Okay. Have any of the people that have this had to replace their batteries?
No.
I have. I've been driving them since
Yeah,
2000.
but you have a plug-in electric.
No, but your battery's going to fail. Lithium batteries fail. They have a Have you ever tried to have it recycled? When I did, from Home Depot, the guy says, I said, where do these go? In a bag in our dumpster. The technology is fantastic. Why are we not mandating recycling on everything? Sure, we have recycling bins. Have you ever gone down to the dump? They put it in the regular dump. If we have to dig it up later. Yes, there's a few recycling centers. We are not ignorant people. When you introduce something into an environment that wasn't there, whether it's data centers, windmills, do we study the long-term effects? And how much energy does it make to make a solar panel? What kind of chemicals? And when they get cracked by hail, what do we do with them? Is there a solar panel recycling place? Those windmills, when they fail or they get blown down, how much energy was made to put that thing up? So there's a big picture. And I loved your example of China. Let's all go over there and see how they treat their environment. My daughter's been there 7 times. There are peasants that can never get out of it, and there are these people in these big cities that they're making this power. And then, great, they have more artificial intelligence centers than we do in the United States of America. They beat us to it.
It's because
At what cost?
their population isn't going to keep up with what they need because they limited their population for so long. So that's the reasoning for needing more AI. So I'm not saying that I agree with China's policies. My point is the reason they can do data centers is because they've exceptionally excelled at tech beforehand at energy. And they've not complied with the green energy. They've not bought into that like we've bought into it in the United States. And my argument is you can have clean energy with natural gas and nuclear. It does not have to be solar and wind only. Interestingly, I did read an article on the wind turbines can be recycled because they're carbon, and some places are grinding them up and putting them in roads.
I didn't see that.
So that is one recyclable. Years ago, there was a thing that showed that you could take solar panels and put them on the highway, and we could all drive on them, and I thought that was a brilliant idea, but my husband told me that wasn't possible. He said it was an AI picture long before AI was a thing. I was like, this is brilliant. Like, it won't ever work.
I think the biggest problem and the biggest piece to the puzzle is the water issue. If you don't have water, you don't have anything.
Right.
Our farmers are irrigating, and if you can't irrigate the crops, water your animals, it's the basic.
Water and land, right?
Yeah.
Water and land. Like, that's what we have to preserve and protect. And it's frustrating to me that, so you, remember we had that issue on Prairie River at your house, and you're on the Prairie River thing. So DNR was gonna reclassify the Prairie River out here. We're gonna change it from, was it cold stream to warm stream? Did I get that right? Warm stream to cold, what? Flip, because of trout, that they put in the Prairie River in the 70s, and they didn't live because they're not a native species. So they were gonna reclassify this river, and it was all about preserving the trout and the water level, and they did this during a drought year, the assessments. So a bunch of landowners bought their own water assessment tool to temperature check the water, and lo and behold, the water temperature really hadn't changed. And so they're no longer, they maybe are slightly reclassifying, I think was the, right?
We're actually gonna get maybe a little better out
Okay,
of them.
yeah,
Not much,
yeah.
but that also had nothing to do with the trout.
No, we go into all of this to say it's about water and protecting trout, but it's really not, it's about controlling of the water.
Well, and I was gonna say this like further though, and it's frustrating because you guys have to report how much water you pull out of there. There's no transparency on these data centers, how much water they pull. Even if you go up to like Nestle, they have a water plant, they pull out, they just put a $200 well permit in, and they pull unbelievable amounts of water. People's wells half went dry. I mean, but there's no transparency on these big companies, but hey, farmers, here's your set of rules. Like ITC coming in with that power line, we're gonna go through wetlands, don't care, But there's a different set of rules for us as farmers, because I think that they can take advantage of us, because we're not billionaires or trillionaires. So it's very frustrating to me, because there's no justice when you have two sets of rules. Here's your companies, you can go plunge your stuff, like in a federally protected natural prairie. But you guys, you touch that, that's a $200,000 fine. So I just don't, that's frustrating to me. I don't see how this works.
I'm in the same boat as you. I'll tell you another place I heard a data center is going, which just, this one really infuriates me. Supposedly it's right south of Marshall, which is it's supposed to be a protected wetland.
Yeah.
They're gonna knock all these trees down and put a data center there when you've already developed the area where Blue Oval is, and they shrunk the footprint of that battery plant there. So there's space there. The infrastructure's all out there. Why don't you put the data center out there?
I agree that, we don't need to plop them out in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
But I am gonna say to everybody that you might wanna educate yourself, because let's change the word from data center to steel mill.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? We all grew up around Midwest Foundry. Did it make noise? Yeah. Did it make smoke? Yeah. But it brought jobs. And if we're gonna chase off jobs, somebody gotta pay
Right.
taxes, So I guess,
You gotta have there's gotta be a balance.
They need to be put in industrial areas, whatever, but educate yourself, because if you called it Steel Dynamics instead of a data center, Steel Dynamics uses a lot of water, they make a lot of noise, but they employ 2,000 people, you know what I'm saying? So
I think that is,
trade-off if you chase
yeah.
it away.
I think the long-term jobs on data centers is a much smaller footprint than, I mean, it's a big influx at the beginning. Our son actually, he has some buddies working down at the one in Toledo. I think they're called electrical technicians, but pretty much they're running wire, and they're making $35 an hour? $40 an hour?
Yeah, for these guys, they don't have a journeyman's card, nothing.
Yeah, and then after 40 hours a week, they're getting time and a half, and then double time,
No tax on overtime.
and and they get housing provided while they're down there. So to say that they can't provide some tax revenue and, contribute, and that one, I haven't been down by there, but, well, I think I was when they were starting, and we didn't even know what it was, but that one's gonna be a very large one. It's just near Toledo where 80, 90, and 75 come together, so. I know we're past time. If you have any more questions, I'm glad to stick around and answer. Also, where do we have the sheet if they want?
There's a sign-in sheet we started sending around, so I don't know where it's at right now. But if you put your name and email on there, we can email you any of the information from tonight, plus the Creo stuff. So just make sure, I have to get it to Jen, and then I'll send that out.
I think the last thing I just remind everyone, please stay involved. Don't forget to vote. Early voting is open right now if you really want to do early voting, but election day is next Tuesday. And then obviously in November, and just educate yourself about the candidates and get involved at the local level.
Did you mention the event you've got coming on reading, or do you want?
No, because I can't talk about that here. You're trying to get me into trouble. Thank you all. Any other questions? I'll stick around.
Thanks for your help.
Yeah.